I'm Nicola.
Hello.
I'm a senior QA slash QA manager. What I do at us2 currently differs depending on the time. So some weeks I'm helping coach other teams of testing. Other weeks I'm like just focusing on test automation. And then I'll be also doing a bit of manual testing soon. I'm originally from New Zealand, as you could probably tell from my accent. I've worked in a variety of projects and roles, and one thing I've started to be, I wouldn't say passionate about, but found very interesting is testing without requirements, especially because I've met testers who don't think you can. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. But if you want to know more about me, just ping me online sometime after this presentation.
Oh, one more thing, Nicola.
Mhm.
Regarding questions, do you prefer people to withhold the questions until after the presentation, or would you like people to just interrupt you and ask questions along the way?
I welcome clarification questions, like if there's a term I use that I haven't explained, I'm happy to expand on that. But more, I guess, deeper questions, I would rather they wait until the end.
Okay, cool. Then we will do that. No problem.
All right.
All right.
Can I start or should I?
Yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Right. Go ahead.
Yes. I can only see my slides. I can't really see your face for visual cues. That's all.
Yeah. I'm
All
sorry.
right.
So.
No, it's cool. All
Action.
right. So today I'm going to be talking about testing without requirements. And I thought I'd start off with a story on a recent project I was on. So I joined a team as the only tester. Beforehand, the team had existed for a while. They hadn't had a tester before. And they were working on a login feature. Now, interestingly enough, there were actually requirements that existed for this feature. There was rules around the maximum attempt of like maximum number of login attempts that were allowed. There were some rules around like character validation for the email and password fields. And then, so there are user stories around that. But then once you're logged in, there was no possibility to log out. Now, I thought this was really strange because in my experience, login tends to come with log out functionality. So I spoke first to the developers asking where was the log out button, first thinking maybe there was a menu that I couldn't see, and they said they hadn't built it. I asked why, and they came back with, well, the developers or the business analysts hadn't actually written a user story or some sort of requirement for this. So I went back to the business analyst, and they decided to add that, and the logout functionality was later added. This I found was an interesting example of requirements that exist, but yet don't exist at the same time. Now, here's the thing. Requirements are everywhere, but then they are not always clearly stated. So then you may be thinking, well, didn't you say this is a talk about testing without requirements? Well, yes, but realistically, I'm going to be focusing a bit more on reading between the lines. So that is testing without explicit requirements. So I'm going to share with you some more real-life examples of what requirements look like, but not necessarily in a work context. So here is a job description for a QA engineer role in Auckland. I have removed the benefits and the part, all the stuff that the company offers to the candidate. The part I'd like to highlight to you would be the bottom section of requirements of what this role or this company is looking for in a QA engineer. They're looking for someone with relevant QA experience as part of a fast-paced product team, able to learn new technologies quickly. Experience using popular test tools such as Atlassian Suite, Charles and Postman, and lastly, an eagerness to learn new tools, Logic projects, and so on. So a fairly short requirements list. But then you may be thinking, well, surely this isn't the whole list of actual requirements that the recruiter and the tech team are looking for when it comes to QA engineer. We'll come back to this later. Here's another example of requirements when you're ordering something, but is a bit more fun, so to speak. So this is the menu of my favorite burger place in Malmö called Tugg. It's a chain around Sweden. And some things I'd like to highlight would be in the top, the fact that you'd be ordering a burger with mixed fries and truffle mayonnaise or coleslaw. In the middle here, chili sensation. So it talks about the extra fillings that the burger would have, such as chili dressing, salad, cheddar cheese, maple syrup bacon, and roasted jalapeno. Lastly, we're told that all the burgers are well done. So this is the information we're given, or that we're explicitly given, that we know. But if we're going to read between the lines, Tugg Burger is known to be, it's not known to be a vegan place or something. So I'm going to make the assumption that when I order a burger from here, I'm getting a beef mince patty. So there are certain things in places you go to when you make a requirement that, given some sort of background information, I'm not going to be explicitly stating everything I expect from something. Now, implicit requirements versus explicit requirements. Put simply, explicit requirements are spoken or written requirements. So with the job description example I previously mentioned, these ones are the relevant QA experience, ability to learn new technologies quickly, experience using popular test tools, and then eagerness to learn new tools. So this is what we will assume that they are specifically measuring. And then implicit requirements are unspoken, unwritten requirements, and therefore you need to infer them. Now here's where I start to read between the lines. So one thing I'd be asking myself would be minimum number of years experience. Given that they're not using the word junior, I may expect that they would want someone with at least 2 or 3 years, maybe, again, could include, I'm using that word or that term. Second would be someone who's good at building relationships within teams. I've found that at least based on what I value and based on what I know others to value who work with QAs, someone who's good at building rapport and talking to and communicating with people within the team, such as a business analyst and developers, they tend to look for that. That isn't explicitly stated in the job description. Someone who can write clear, reproducible bug reports. One more requirement that with a QA engineer, you may expect that, but it isn't, I'm going to say it's not always a given, to be honest. The last thing, which I haven't written on the slide, but I would then ask myself, is they're using the word QA engineer. So then I'd be wondering, are they expecting someone who's a bit more on the technical side? So yeah, just questions I'm throwing out there for an example of implicit requirements that you know are there, but aren't obviously there. So there are three, based on my experience, there are three main areas in which you can see shape implicit requirements. So the first one is people's past experiences. The second is people's understanding what the company does or is. And lastly, what people assume to be a given. So people's past experiences. So when we're talking about the business analyst who's writing them, the level of requirements and projects they have worked on. So I have found that based on what people have worked with before, then that's what they may tend to keep on going with. Like they may think that that's enough detail. When you're a consultant and you work on different projects, you can see everything from nothing to bare bones to very, very long details. Moving on to the second point on the slide, past projects and past personal experiences. So I would say past projects could be if, as a business analyst, so the one who forgot to write the logout functionality requirement, maybe in future projects, he will make sure to explicitly write the logout functionality and some sort of equivalence because he's learned from that mistake before. Past personal experiences could be just like what you've experienced in real life. So the way that you have, how you would expect apps to behave. The second point would be people's understanding of what the company does or is. So what is the company known for and what's the desired reputation? An example I'd like to give would be high-end online commerce stores. They tend to be fairly, I guess you could say, clean. So in terms of design and what you're looking for, you could also look at, say, IKEA, which is supposed to be family-friendly. So making sure that it's easy to navigate. And then lastly, what people assume to be a given. So this for me is the most interesting one. Projects I have worked on don't always have non-functional requirements, but the thing is the client tends to expect it. So if you were to build a system that technically worked, but was slow as fuck, for some reason the client wouldn't be happy, right? So they might not explicitly say that it has to be X fast or whatever, but there is going to be expectation of it being reasonably fast, like, you know, we're like the sorts of speeds we have in 2021. The second would be security. So they would expect that someone can easily hack into their website, or that when you log in, someone could not easily have a wee nosy to see the information you're sending when you send over your email and password. Security could also go into, for the password field, that it automatically comes in asterisks. These two things tend to be a given. Lastly, browser device support. I have found that this also isn't always going to be explicitly stated, but they are going to expect, like, you know, current devices and a few back. But then it's up to the team or the QA to find out exactly how far back and what exactly should be supported. So these are just starting points of what people assume to be a given. Now, the question is, what should I do if, or when, let's be honest, we're faced with unclear requirements or a lack of requirements? So the first thing is to state your assumptions clearly. I tend to both write everything I'm expecting. So when I get the designs, I would write exactly how I expect the app to behave, and also have some testing discussions with the developers. So a feature that I'm working on now is online appointment booking, where where customers can book time slots and on the mobile app, and send the request. Now, there's hardly any requirements. The designs here is being used as requirements. So I started to talk about, in terms of expectations, that I double checked that in the market we're targeting, that the week starts on Monday, so that the weekly view is Monday to Sunday. Things like I expect that a day without any available times is not selectable. I wrote down my expectation around the confirm button being disabled until you have selected a time which is available. I have written down an expectation around radio buttons, because you can only select one, you can't select multiple, like, you know, with checkboxes. So I tried to be super clear about what I was expecting for everything, because the thing is, if I'm wrong, I want to know it, right? And I don't say I want everyone to know it, but it's nice to get on the same page fairly quickly. There's another way which you can handle, or which helps you handle unclear or lack of requirements, and this would be heuristics. 1 second. But to better understand heuristics, I think we need to first look at oracles. What's an oracle? Holy shit. I think I've messed up my slides. Okay, sorry. I mixed it up. So an oracle is what you use to determine if a test has passed or failed. So often this would be written requirements, and when someone writes a bug, they may refer to a written requirement. A heuristic is a mental shortcut that allows people to solve problems and make judgments quickly and efficiently. Now, there's a heuristic that I quite like to use called hiccups. I like to use this for both when I don't have requirements or very, very little. I also like to use it to fill in the gaps when even when things are fairly well documented. It tends to help me come up with test ideas. So yeah, so I'm sorry. So consistency with history. This heuristic is about, I interpret it in two ways. It's about being consistent with previous versions of the product, but it's also about, in my opinion, being consistent with past actions that have happened during your time with something. So here is a website. This is an online bookstore for New Zealand. So if I was going to talk about like the consistency with history heuristic, I could say that assuming we're not specifically targeting the categories and the order of categories, then the order in the top section would stay the same. So top picks, books, stationery, arts and crafts, so on. Same would go for the book categories itself, so that this would show in the same order. So I may make that assumption. A second one example would be consistency with the history, like the historic behavior. So here, before I took these screenshots, I had, in fact, added these two books. So your cart screen to the left is the pop-up window that appears when you click on the shopping cart icon. So here I'm seeing that it's the correct products. I'm taking note of the price and the total amount. I click on checkout. I'm now taking to basket. So now I'm checking, okay, making sure that the correct information is carried over and that there's no nasty surprises. And I'm seeing here, same products, same prices, and they're mentioning the discount still. It's not like now they're saying buy extra books and save less. Lastly, at the bottom of this payment page, they're talking about the same dollar amount that's owing, so the $32.98 matches the total that I saw at the start. So it's nice. I mean, it's funny because you think it's a given, but it's nice knowing that what you have done in the past matches the behavior you're seeing right now. Consistency with image. So I briefly talked about this. So an example would be a website.
Yeah.
Sorry? Someone asking a question?
Sorry, is somebody trying to ask a question? Nope, maybe somebody just accidentally unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I briefly kind of went over this already, but in terms of the image they want to portray, so let's say Prada, they're probably not going to have a very colorful website. I find from what, I mean, I'm not really into fashion myself and high-end fashion, so I don't know my stuff here. But what I've noticed is when I've gone through different high-end fashion websites, they do tend to be simple or monochromatic to, I guess, in that way, communicate luxury. Consistency with comparable products. This heuristic is about comparing the product you're testing to a product that I guess you would say is similar, or like a competitor, right? So here are some screenshots from Signal. I had switched to Signal from WhatsApp a few months ago, and there are certain things that you kind of expect from apps of a certain category. On the left-hand side, this is the take photo screen. So the positioning of the icons are fairly consistent with what I've experienced in other messaging apps. Also the icons themselves and the fact that these icons exist. So you can exit the take photo screen, you can switch the camera from selfie mode to non-selfie mode, you can turn on flash, you can send an attachment of a photo you already have, you can send multiple. And then on the right-hand side, like most messaging apps, well, this was when I just downloaded it, so I didn't have any conversations, but you'd have like a list of conversations, right? On the right-hand page, and you'd also have the ability to create a message has an icon on the top right corner. So it's consistent with comparable products, e.g. WhatsApp or Messenger or whatever, in that regard. Consistency with claims. This heuristic is around where you're testing against what the company claims it is or can do. So the Dreams app, this is an app where it's supposed to help you save money. I've used it before, and on the website it says word for word, the Dreams app makes saving as easy as spending. Now, that's actually a bit of a hard thing to test against, to be honest. But if you're looking at usability, you're trying to think, well, how exactly do they make it easy, to save? Other claims I've seen, the thing is, I've seen other claims before about other websites regarding speed. I just couldn't find those ones right now. Those ones are a little bit easier to test against when it comes to consistency with claims. Consistency with user desires, or it used to be called consistency with user expectations. This heuristic is around testing against what you believe a reasonable user would want from the feature or from the app. So, for example, you may expect that a logged in user applying for a home loan would have their known information already filled in, so that you didn't have to supply redundant information that the bank would already have. Consistency within the product itself. In this heuristic, you are using the product to test against the product. So you're making sure that there's no contradicting stuff within the product. So I'll give you an example here. So this is a online recipe website. I'd like to highlight first the breadcrumbs on the left-hand side. So home recipes, dessert recipes, cakes, white cake recipes. But then on the left-hand side, they call it desserts, not dessert recipes in the breadcrumbs. So I'd be asking questions there. Why do they call it something different? Another thing I would be asking about would be the placement of the breadcrumb as to why the position has changed. Now, the thing with heuristics, as you might have started to notice, is they are fallible. So I'm not saying that if you test against a heuristic that you're definitely going to be right if things are wrong according to the heuristic. But it does give you a good idea as to where to start and where things could go wrong. So if I was to see this, I wouldn't know for sure there's a problem. They could want to treat the placement of breadcrumbs differently depending on how deep into the breadcrumb list you are. So that's just one thing to be aware of. Consistency with purpose. So here you're making sure that you can do what the app or feature or website is made for. So for example, with a messaging app, they can actually send and receive messages. with consistency with purpose, if you can't, if messages won't send, right, you keep on getting error, then hey, that fails that heuristic. Or if you know that your friend has sent a message and it's shown on their side that it's sent, but then you're not receiving it, hey, you've got a problem. Consistency with statutes. With this heuristic, you are testing against laws. Some examples would be GDPR in the EU. This was introduced a few years ago. And then a recent example I've come across as well would be accessibility requirements in the US. So making sure that what you build is meeting the requirements of the laws of the country you're going to be in. Now, in summary, I think it's important to understand that even if there are no requirements, there are still requirements, and better yet, even if there are requirements, there are going to be more, there are almost definitely going to be more requirements that actually aren't stated. The goal is a shared understanding, so I highly recommend stating your assumptions. It's better to know you're wrong in your assumptions than to find out later down the track. And it also, I find, results in some really good conversations. A great way to help you fill the gaps is the use of heuristics. And one of my go-tos would be hiccups, which I talked about. Some recommended reading would be Testing Without a Map. So this by Michael Bolton talks about the hiccups, heuristics. Another one I've used, but I haven't gone into as much detail on, is a heuristic test strategy model by James Bach. So I'd also like to recommend that for testing without requirements. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Oh, thank you, Nicola. So the floor is open. Please share your questions if you have any. Otherwise, I have a few up my sleeve, but I'll keep quiet for now. I see that my friend Gustav has lots of questions, right, Gustav?
Always questions, yeah. Would you like me to start?
Yeah, shoot.
Yeah. Thanks, Nicola. That was a great run through. I have some thought lingering in my mind here. By the way, no one is using their camera, right? I want to see everyone. I just have these kind of small icons. Is it possible? If you feel daring, please turn on your camera. Anyway, yeah, there we go. Wow. Look at that. Everyone is alive. Great. So yeah, Nicola, I wanted to ask you about the heuristic requirements. I mean, that is a good strategy to, I guess, find requirements in the web of the world, so to say. So based on maybe experience from other users, other systems, you can grasp this information. But what would you typically do with that information? Would you refer it as it is, or would you start, writing it down? Or what is the best way to refer to these heuristics? Because they're kind of vague, right? Could be. Oh, I can't hear you, Nicola. You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I was coughing a bit, so I tried to make sure I was on mute. When you say when I first refer to it, you mean when I would talk about it with others in the team?
I'm guessing you're using this new knowledge, or this kind of way of finding requirements for yourself, right? You're kind of learning with this technique. But how would you typically move forward? Yeah, within the team or within a company or something? Because if you as a person leave, then it's here, right?
It's here. So I actually write a lot of this down. We're currently working with Jira. So I do try to write a lot about my expectations against these heuristics for features I'm testing. I don't, in my opinion, not all of these matter for every feature. So it's not like I've got this thing called hiccups for every single one. So that's one thing I'd like to highlight. In terms of talking about most of these, things like the comparable product heuristic, product in itself. A few of them, I find that designers are very good advocate for them, because, I mean, I don't know much about design, but it seems to me that what their principles are align a lot with, like, a lot of this to do with like usability and having a good product. So in terms of getting allies, I find that also helps. Of course, when you leave a project or a company, you're always going to have some sort of knowledge loss. But I do my best to write down my expectations around the product as much as I can. Both, I guess, for knowledge preservation, if and when I move on, whether or not that's in a few months or a few years, but also because you can have a discussion around things and you think you're on the same page and everyone thinks they have the same understanding of how the feature or app should be. But then when things are written down, then you see, oh, actually, this is what I thought. So I like to try and write down, and I always preface this is my understanding of what should happen. And then it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Have I answered your question?
Yeah, I think so. You kind of hovered around it. So yeah, it was good. That was good. No, it's just it's good to find allies then who maybe are taking it on, so to say. It becomes part of like the way everybody's working then. So that's a good answer, I think. Yeah. Thanks.
Of course.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I switched off my camera because my wife came in with a big bowl of lime and asked me to make lime juice. So I'm pressing lime juice. That's why you can't see me. But I was wondering, Nicola, you mentioned that you met testers that what do you say something about they weren't aware of this.
The ones I
implicit requirements.
So the ones that I met, they hadn't worked on projects where they weren't requirements or they were so little. So they say that they can't even start testing, writing the test cases or doing some sort of test prep or even testing because there were no requirements. Or there was very not detailed, lacking requirements, so to speak. That's correct.
Okay. So how did you go about helping them overcome this blockage of just sitting around waiting for requirements to be written down?
Took a bit of time, to be honest, because I was new, so I had to earn some trust. I find talking about something that's so new to someone is a bit easier when you've already kind of proven yourself to them. And this person had the same number of years of experience. I wasn't like obviously senior to them. I had no authority over this person. They didn't have to listen to me. So I talked to them about expectations. So like previous apps they had worked on that were similar, and the requirements or the implicit requirements that someone would have. So try to come up with some ideas there. I then also encouraged him to just start writing some ideas as to what he's expecting so he could share it with the team. And I think this person, because in this project they didn't have a business analyst, they had someone who had to do multiple roles, including the business analyst role. So I encouraged this person to write what they were expecting and then get corrected by the team. And I didn't think that was a bad thing because it gives people a starting point. That was probably be the more recent example I can think of. But the thing is, I've found that when things are new to someone and you haven't really built that relationship, I'm going to be open to admit it's harder because, like, to some people, the idea of testing without requirements is so foreign. But then when you dig deeper and you realize that, well, you can't ever have 100% explicit written requirements, then testing without requirements or testing with very little written requirements is like a level up. So, I mean, the sad thing is this person had jumped from like I guess it would be such easy situations to being thrown into the deep end.
Okay,
Have
so building a solid relationship was maybe even necessary to be able to remove this blockage. Would you say that's correct?
For this situation, yes.
Yeah.
The person, I think, was kind of stubborn, and I mean the thing is, like, not just necessarily with dealing with requirements or other things, but when it comes to introducing new ideas, and especially when you're like when you've got the same number of years experience, or you're even more junior than the person, then some people may think like, who the fuck do you think you are, right? Because like it can be hard with some people. They think they know a lot already. They think they're already smart. So you kind of have to not just build a relationship, but kind of help them realize certain things that they don't necessarily want to be explicitly told sometimes. So the mixture of guiding versus telling and finding the balance. But yeah, building relationships for me in the past has definitely helped.
Elvir, I see a raised hand. So you're waiting for your turn. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I was interested in this talk because I'm literally like working in a project where we constantly have, or we only have implicit requirements from our product owner, where he says, yeah, I want this feature X implemented, and then nothing more than that, like nothing. Yeah, I want this, I want it to work like this or work like that, and so on. So we, I mean, for the things that Nicola mentioned a lot about, like building relationship is extremely important, especially if you're working in a project where you don't have explicit requirements that tell you, yeah, this needs to be like this, or this button has to have this color, and so on and so forth. So what my experience had told me is that we always have to, like, if we're changing for example, the UI, we have a person that is responsible, that is leading, for example, that change. He creates some wireframes about how it's going to look like, and he presents that to us, and then we talk about it, and how some button, or how some of these buttons are going to work, or how this windows should look like, and so on. But as soon as there's a disagreement between, for example, me and the developer, when I'm testing that feature, it's always what we do is always we bring that up to the team, and then we discuss about what it should be like. So we're trying to reach some kind of a consensus, and then we also sync that up with the product owner. So it's like the implicit requirements are very hard. So for our solution for that is to have a good way to communicate within the team, so that there are no bad feelings between if they choose the developer side or mine, but that it's an open discussion about this feature, or about that implicit requirement that we're trying to discuss, and so on. So it has to be, you have to have a good relationship between the testers and the developers. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Elvir.
One thing I wanted to touch on that you kind of mentioned, but made me think about, is you said how the product owner like would have, like, I just want a feature. The funny thing is, people don't think that they aren't giving requirements. They may think it's enough. So that's one thing I've also learned, that people don't even think that they are not giving you enough to work off. But then I think I said this already, people are more than happy to tell you when you're wrong. So if you make things explicit and write down your assumptions, your understanding, and you share it in your discussions, then someone's going to say you're wrong if you Are there any more questions?
I have some thinking going on here again. I'll share it.
Go, Gustav, go.
I was thinking about, in the beginning of the presentation there, you put performance, security, and then there was a third thing, I don't remember, as kind of areas where you usually see a lack of requirements.
Yes.
Right. And what I was thinking there is that because I'm working a lot with performance testing, and to be honest, it's, even though I've been working with it for 20 years, it's still difficult for me to formulate good requirements around that specific area. So there is a kind of a, you have to cut the product owner some slack kind of thing, because I've never seen like perfect requirements. I don't think anybody has anywhere, and it's kind of one of the missions for the team is to formulate them, right? To together, I mean, to get your heads together and try to really get into what's missing and how do we bridge that gap, kind of thing. And that's something I see with testers quite a lot, is that some kind of magical process is supposed to happen before starting, meaning you should have perfect requirements, and that's impossible. It's like unfair to expect that from anyone. There was not a question hiding in there. It was just my current thoughts. So thanks.
No, well, I mean, the funny thing is, like, you're right that some people may expect like some perfect process, but I guess it's nice to just have good enough. In terms of like requirements for performance, I think one reason I specifically brought it up is when you're working on a project for a while, you can kind of forget what it's like to be a user. So things like things being slow to load, you may start to think that's normal because you just get like this tunnel vision, but then you don't realize that when you hand it over to like business users, they're like, well, what the fuck, this is slow. So it's something to be aware of, that maybe there isn't some sort of statement saying it has to load this fast, but at least being aware of it and then checking against that and recording what you find. I'm by no means knowledgeable about performance testing, but I do try to do some base checks to make sure that things are okay, and then check, is this good enough? Is this acceptable to the business user or to the market or whatever? So,
yeah.
I mean, oftentimes, like people talk about us work with testing, that we should be the customer voice, or that we should know how the customer thinks and acts, and that we should break the software how the customer breaks software. But that is also, I think, it's a bit of a false premise. Also, what I think is our main objective is when it comes to like an implicit requirement is to question stuff within the stuff that you're testing. You have to always question. You always have to. Sure, you are looking at it from maybe a customer, but customer perspective, but also the most important part is to raise discussions around that requirement, because if nobody does it, then it will fall between the chairs, so to speak.
Yeah, this would represent a good entry point for that discussion. So yeah, good reflection there.
One thing I'd like to say is I'm wary about saying that I'm like the customer. It depends, I mean, slightly on the product, but the two reasons I say that is I've worked often on products that I personally am not a customer of. The second would be by working the project, I become blind to certain things. So I gave the example earlier about with performance, like you can get used to doing things in a slow way, or you can get used to doing certain workarounds that when you give it to a business user, things just stand out to them quickly. So I do try to be wary of my limitations that my point of view has by being a tester in the team. So there's some context there, but yeah, it's kind of something I keep in mind.
I'm wondering about one thing. You said that if there are no requirements, you used to write down your assumptions or the requirements. I'm just wondering, how do you know when to stop? Could there be like too many requirements, or is it like the more you write, the better?
Let me think. I've never come across I've never personally come across too many. As part of it has to do with time. So when things have been acquired on a project, I probably have things written a bit more detail in my testing notes, to be honest. And it's also, I mean, even when you're trying to, even if you're aware of explicit and implicit requirements, I'm not going to actually write down every explicit requirement or every requirement, because there'll still be things that are implicit that I haven't thought of. So yeah, for me, time has been the limitation. But I'd love to hear from others if they think that there's a level that would be too much and why that would be, if others have something to say to this.
I don't know if you can do too much, but perhaps it can take too long time. I'm guessing the time can be a factor, that you have to stop because, yeah, other things are more important, or it loses its value when if it becomes too detailed, when it's just assumptions.
Yeah, I have same feeling. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes.
And now you're muted, Jan Long. You were unmuted just a second ago, but now you're muted again. You're still muted. Now you were unmuted for a second. You're still muted. Let's see if you can find the. Maybe I can unmute you from here. Just a second. Just a second, Jan Long.
I don't think so, David. It's like a matter of integrity or something. I don't think. Yeah.
No. And now you're unmuted. Now you can speak.
No.
No, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. No.
Very, very frustrating, but I'm sorry.
I can cut it with a.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to add some comments. I think this the question from Anna is should we proceed of perfection requirements, or rather focus on agree upon what is good enough to proceed the development tasks, so which we can add value to the customer. And I think both Nicola and David has the comments. A lot of time it's we're fighting, or we together as a team was trying to be relevant to the market, and with the speed and the timing always the priority, to think about priority multiple times before we actually try to think about the other more bonus improvements. For example, always form a better requirements from the beginning. Maybe that's quite ideal. It was a lot of times can be just a need with vague inputs, but the team have to take the inputs and agreed upon what can be done, and at that point of sign up of agreement, then it can become more and more clear from that point of view.
Thank you. One thing I realized, that one thing that you said that triggered me for answering Anna's question a bit more clearly is, other than the time aspect, and it's hard to like describe, but we're kind of aiming for good enough. So good enough to have a shared understanding that we all, as a developer and designer and testers, have the same understanding of what the app or feature should do. So whatever level of requirements is needed, or written requirements needed to support that, I think is the amount you want.
I'm thinking also there are quite a few telltale signs if you're going too far. I mean, if you haven't gone too far, it's not a problem. But if you go too far, you're starting to have like maintenance issues. I mean, you have a lot of text or a lot of whatever you're creating, and you're starting to create duplicates. You're starting to question yourself if that's needed or that. I mean, it becomes more of a blur than what it's actually supposed to be. I mean, it's supposed to explain something quite clearly, and that is a telltale sign that you kind of passed that threshold, and then you should probably pull back a bit, and then only continue with some clear extensions, not trying to describe the same thing over and over. Then you're gonna it's like anything, any development. You don't want to do duplicate code, for example. You want to reuse methods, etc. So I think it's a similar thing with requirements.
But I guess it has to do a lot with like how we're working today, with I assume a lot of people are working within agile Scrum teams and so on. So it's how you work with an epic or story, feature story for that matter, and how you break it down. And then, like Young said, it's what is the value for the customer. And then when you break down a feature into even smaller tasks, and those tasks have their own requirements and so on, so forth. So you have to work with the priority first. What is the biggest? What has the biggest value to the customer right now, and then work from there. I guess that's at least how we work in my team.
Thank you, Elvir. Are there any more questions? Or perhaps some comment from Nicola, something that you haven't said already?
Not at this stage.
No? Okay.
I was wondering who the AI person was, but he or she disappeared. I'm thinking it might be a robot.
Oh, we had Skynet here. Oh, that's interesting.
We have Skynet. Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh,
all right.
Nice guests. You're pulling in the interesting guests here, Nicola. That's great.
Yeah.
So if there are no further questions, there's at least where I live, there's a wonderful almost summer evening with blue skies and no wind. So perhaps we'll let everybody go outside and have an ice cream. And thank Nicola for your time and for your presentation. Thank you very much. And have a good summer, everybody. See you in, I don't know, August perhaps, for the next meetup.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay.
Look,
Bye
Lisa
bye.
is in a nice place.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.